Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast. Today's episode features Michael Mire, Chief Revenue Officer at SweetIQ. It was a great conversation. You might have heard of SweetIQ recently being in the news. They were recently acquired by Reach Local, so made a lot of waves. Pretty good Montreal success story, if I might say. And a little bit on Michael and his background. He's CRO at SweetIQ, a local search marketing platform that converts online search into in-store sales. It was founded 7 years ago. Michael's an entrepreneur at heart. He's a marketer, public speaker, and mentor in the startup community. He has over 10 years of experience in marketing operations of several successful Canadian startups, including Experience Wifi, Microcap, Trade, and AdBeer marketing. As an entrepreneur, Michael saw the potential for local search when he founded SweetIQ, and we get into it quite a bit in this episode. And from there, he developed a team. He developed a platform to do what other tools could not, basically drive foot traffic to brick and mortar stores in a measurable and transparent way. I really enjoyed the conversation. We dove into the matter of how SweetIQ shifted from a service-based agency doing PPC to a software company. We spoke about the growth story behind their success and how they scaled to over 140 employees today. The lessons you learned along the way, including important funding milestones, how he thinks about strategy and how he reverse engineers the ideal end state for his company, and he uses a very iterative fashion to get there. And then at the end, we spoke about the future of the space, local marketing in particular, and a lot about the consolidation and tech trends he's looking at. Michael's generous with his time and insights. He's, for myself, a great example of a successful entrepreneur that takes risks and seeks to constantly improve. I learned a ton that I think I'm going to apply to my own business, and that I hope that you do the same. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Really happy to be here in your, I guess, brand new offices. I think you guys moved in here in August. I have to say, pretty nice setup.
Thank you. Yeah, it's if you're a Habs fan, it's right next to the Bell Center. Pretty centrally located, right next to all the train stations, metro station. Great space, great building. We're happy to move in finally.
Nice. Yeah, I guess you're starting to see now, I guess trouble leaving the building when there's Habs games on.
Actually, yeah, you have to get out either quite early, and there's, I guess, with all the construction going on in the city these days, everything is a challenge to get around unless you're on foot.
Cool. Well, Michael, I guess maybe just a first question. What led you to start your own company and co-found SweetIQ?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. My family, I guess, a long line of like entrepreneurs. So it really was never a question of, in my mind, whether or not I would be an entrepreneur. I guess the question always was with what and how. And so specifically to SweetIQ, I had an ad agency previously that we started in the mid 2000s, and we were selling pay-per-click. And it was a tough business. It was quite competitive. And after a while, as it began to mature, you were nothing more than a commodity, right? It was selling Google, AdWords, and then you were charging management fees on top. And that whole experience really led me to search out how could we, A, differentiate ourselves, and B, increase stickiness with customers. And what we found is that services that were managed and owned by the agency. What I also learned is that agency or any service-based business is very difficult. Again, because you don't necessarily have that clear differentiator. So long story short, we came across local search. Google introduced the maps into the search engine results pages, and we started to optimize for that as a service to small businesses. And as we started to grow that line of the business, we realized that it was extremely difficult to scale because there were no tools. That was, I guess, the eureka moment when we decided, or we identified the opportunity to be the tool or the software provider versus the service provider. And so that's how SweetIQ was born.
It's a great story. So I guess the lesson was like you wanted to move away from a very competitive space where there's a bunch of agencies I've worked in a few in my past, and it's hard to differentiate. And you saw the opportunity. Well, there's this, there's a software angle that's unoccupied right now. So how did that shift happen? Did it happen gradually, or did it happen like, over a weekend, over beers? Like, hey, you guys were switching the entire, focus.
Yeah, it had to it had to happen gradually, but it happened relatively quick. Probably within the scope of 3 months, we radically shifted from providing services to software. In that time, we had to make a transition plan for all of the existing customers. And because we had only been doing it for about 9 to 10 months, we had only been providing service for 9 to 10 months, it was relatively easy. There was very little emotional baggage attached to keeping the customers, and we transitioned them off, as we transitioned the business away. I mean, it was tough because it was the only source of income at the time. And so we basically transitioned from a revenue generating business to a development shop to develop the software.
That's pretty crazy. It reminds me a bit of the story of Netflix. I don't know if you've heard it, but back when they were selling just DVDs, the founder, Reed Hastings, decided to remove the DVD team from management meetings when it still accounted for 100% of revenue and profits, right? It takes a bit of courage to make that kind of a call. So hats off to making, pulling the Band-Aid and doing it. Were there any moments of, how should I say, actually, I'll ask a different question. How did you validate that was the right approach? Like, what made you guys think, okay, this is definitely going to work?
That's a tough question, but I think there were multiple times, right? I think at first it came to a point where we know we didn't want to be in the service business, right? Whenever you would call up on a client, they had been solicited by dozens of people before you. So that was a very telltale sign. So for us, the question was really about, do we go directly to what we want to do or where the opportunity is, i.e. providing the services? Or do we take a very roundabout way and getting there and the safe approach? So, I mean, the amount of revenue wasn't huge, so it wasn't a tough decision as is per your Netflix example. But it's where we knew we wanted to be. So to the second part of your question of how do we validate it is we built an MVP. And I remember literally taking, on my iPad, going to, digital marketing shows and showing people and getting their feedback. And in hindsight, we probably biased the results, tremendously in terms of seeing whether or not they were connecting with what we had. But we had, every time there was a junction, right, of do we continue or do we not, something always positive happened to continue to encourage us along. And one of the things I remember is the first big prospect that we ever came across was a large Canadian bank, and we loaded their 2,000 locations onto our platform, and it just crashed the whole thing. But we kept going, and after we started to pitch and looking for investors, we had a lot of early traction with prospects and customers and potential investors. And from there, it was really, we went past the point of no return. It was like, we're either going to go down in a blaze of glory or we're going to be ultra successful.
The big smoking crater in the ground, or like massive, massive success. How big was the team at that point? Like, I imagine hiring PPC experts is very different than software developer and like a customer success team. So I imagine you had to make quite a few structural changes to the team as well.
Yeah. So the initial team was Mo and myself. Mo was my partner. We had a third partner at the time. We had one, we actually scaled back the entire service team down to one person. And then we had one software developer and a team of 3 or 4 developers offshore. So it was so in reality, it was a core team of about 4 or 5. And it stayed that size for about almost an entire year until we raised funding.
And what happened after funding? Obviously, I guess you hit the accelerator. What were the first hires? What were the big, let's say, strategic moves that you made right after the funding?
We needed a place to work out of. So I think that in today's day and age, it's very possible to work remotely. But for us, the synergies of being present in the same space far outweighed any of the consequences of travel or commuting. So the first hires were really the dev team. We needed to take our MVP and build it out into a commercial product, or for us, it was more or less a beta. And in order to do that, we needed a dev team because, you could only sell an MVP so much, but when the customer says, okay, I'm ready to come on board, I think the Band-Aids that are holding the MVP together become very apparent, and we needed to move away from that as quick as possible. So we had an initial team, probably fast forward about 6 months, we were about 7 or 8. So we had 4. At that point, we brought all of the software development in-house. We had a dev team of 4. We had one jack of all trades or account manager. And then we had also a very small marketing team of a content writer and a PR person, which really helped us launch the product initially.
And how has your own skill set kind of changed, right? Like from starting as a leader of a service/agency business to, chief revenue officer of a, hyper growth SaaS startup, right? I can imagine the hat that you're wearing today is very different, right? How did you manage just your own personal transition?
It's tough. It's the live or die or survive by all means startup mentality. It takes a certain type of person to be able to manage that. But as you evolve, you have to effectively evolve into a manager and a leader, right? It's very different to lead by, okay, survival, let's get sales on the board. There's pretty much everybody does a little bit of everything, to a very structured company or a rapidly growing company, because as the company scales and as the scale accelerates, things need to be very well defined. And the type of people that you hire for in the early days, the people that can live with chaos, there's a finite number of those. And you need to evolve into a company where people want to work, i.e. they have a very well defined job. So my skill set has evolved as, a manager or a leader, as well as being able to just keep focus on one very narrow area. When I started, I would do everything from, product testing to, mundane data entry stuff, to helping with accounting, to now just focusing on sales and sales strategy and sales performance. So that the hardest transition is to actually go from touching a little bit of everything to narrowly focusing on one or two areas of the business.
Do you see how SweetIQ's evolved in terms of like steps, like in terms of, let's say, like generations, or is it a more linear progression? Like you guys are 140 employees. Obviously you're past, let's say, the 10, 20 employee mark. Do you see like specific milestones where there's like a shift in DNA, or for you is it more how should I say, more linear in terms of a progression?
I think the evolution wasn't as clean as just a straight linear progression. It was chunky. It was just wake up one day and, okay, this is what we have to do. And typically that happened for us, at least. If I had to pick particular milestones, typically it happened around funding events, right? And why do I say funding events and not sales is because of the sales progression. So our business was very unlike a B2C, where it's about eyeballs and you get a lot of money thrown at you. We're very much a B2B SaaS company where it was all about being, driving it by sales and hitting certain sales milestones. And those sales milestones allowed us to get to achieve those funding milestones. So that being said is that I think the real initial milestone was obviously raising our initial seed round. So it kind of fomented our ability to take our concept and start to build a business around it. Then the next milestone after that was raising that next round of funding, where we kind of had initial product market fit. And we knew, okay, we have to grow our sales team and we need more sales, and formalize the dev team and add an account manager. And then the next was our Series A, which was a huge milestone, because at that point you have product market fit, and you're going from an early stage startup to a growth phase startup. And the ability to do that that's really where that scope needs to change, right? And every company is different. It either evolves over time or it's just, like I said, it's abrupt. It's one morning you wake up and you realize, okay, we need a change. And that at that point, the company is starting to mature where you have directors in place to manage the different departments. And then the latest change, I would say, the previous change was pretty much about a year ago for us, where we acquired our first company. And we actually had started to prepare for another financing event before the acquisition happened. And in there we were formalized. It was like maturing from going from like elementary school or high school to college or to university, right? Or a lot of people in the startup space like to use, sports analogies or hockey analogies where you go from like AA to AAA to the pros. And it's really about building up the maturity of that management team, because you can't put an immature manager in place and expect to build an organization around that person, because typically the average person would just crush under the pressure because they don't have that skill set. So we really go from one type of manager or inexperienced manager to experienced managers to professional managers. Then you get to, the blue chip type managers, which is where we're coming into now after our post acquisition as the organization matures. And, we're working within a Fortune 1000 company, i.e. Gannett.
Okay. No, that's very interesting. Like, I like how you juxtapose the funding events with the life cycle of the company. And maybe to dive into SweetIQ a bit more, how would you explain simply your business model?
Straightforward. It's a SaaS model, so it's subscription based. Our unit driver is the number of locations, so it's not number of users, it's number of locations. We deal exclusively with brick and mortar businesses. So it could be anything from a retail store or a restaurant chain all the way to, hospital networks and everything in between.
And how do you define your competitive advantages, right? I know there are multiple solutions on the market. What do you think you guys excel at?
We excel on multiple fronts. The market is maturing rapidly. So for us, where we've been really successful is being able to maintain a SaaS approach. So where I differentiate SaaS in, let's say, service or consulting, or in marketing, it's agency world, it's very customized, right? It's, one client wants a certain configuration and that's different from all the other clients. We've been able to take that approach, but build that into the software. And I coined the term SaaSify it. So we've taken the local search aspect of the agency approach and SaaSified it. So that's one approach. Too early on, one of our competitive advantages, we were one of the only competitors, believe it or not, that actually had customer service, account managers dedicated to every account. That's much less of a competitive advantage today. And last but not least, we were the first in the market to really change the narrative from where are we going to get you, listed, or how are we going to increase your online presence, to what is that presence actually doing for you? So building analytics and ROI metrics around the work that we're doing, around the services that we're providing for you. And so that changes the narrative from, hey, I want to make sure that all my restaurants or stores have their updated Google information, hours of operation, my latest logo, the proper, phone number, to what are those Google listings actually doing for us? And I'll frame that for you is that we have a very large retail customer in the southern US, and during Hurricane, I think it was Irma, they had to close a lot of their stores. And what they found was there was a 50x difference, 50 times difference between the traffic that came to their website and that went to the Google pages.
Oh, wow. So
it just shows how important those pages are. And now as the product evolves, now Google is finally getting in a lot deeper with these analytics, with what I call the ROI metrics. And so we coined the term the online to offline funnel.
Now, that's very interesting. I find because I talk about this quite a bit. It's like, people don't wake up and they're like, I'm not today I'm a mobile customer. Tomorrow I'm a retail customer. It's all one big blend, right? So I love the fact how you're positioning, giving ROI metrics, right? Versus like you have X listings and the quality of those listings, but you're trying to give the actual return on investment impact. Where do you see that natural evolution heading? Like now that obviously the world's gone mobile, do you see more like actually quantifying in-store conversion and being able to pass that back to customers?
I see that specifically the online to offline segment of analytics is going to continue to accelerate at an accelerated pace, probably over the next 2 or 3 years. We're seeing Google just announced, I think it was yesterday, that they're going to have even more metrics available to Google My Business customers, where they're going to be able to give you ideas of how many people are actually coming to store. Any, I don't want to say major, but any mid-size retail chain, it doesn't matter what you sell, as long as you're a Google AdWords customer, they will come to your store, they'll geocode your store so that they can ping it every time, or they can get the actual in-store or geolocation traffic. I mean, I don't have to tell you about Google's capabilities, but you're very well aware that pretty much every phone in the world has something of Google on them, so they can track all of us. And that inherently is a virtuous circle for them, or a virtuous loop, to continue to augment their Google AdWords business, which will help them to continue to invest in this space. And the truth is, the same way today that we expect when we advertise anywhere online for our website or for our e-commerce site, we can track it end to end, and have pretty much almost 100% attribution. That will be the same for online to offline. And it doesn't stop at online. It's TV eventually. I don't know about radio. I don't know the lifespan of radio and how we can track, but TV is definitely included in there. There's tons of very interesting IP-based technology that's built into TVs, especially that pretty much every TV today is a smart TV. And whatever future means of advertising that will exist down the road, they're going to be fully auditable. They're going to have a whole audit trail that, an advertiser can track from when the ad was viewed to how it helped attribute the customer wherever they go, in store, online, and whatever the next thing is.
So it seems to be that there's quite a few technical barriers still, right? Like people have, retailers have different ERPs, different systems, different measurement. So do you see the future where it's going to be a single player like a Google, for instance, that by virtue of the amount of data they have in their analytics are able to provide this as a dashboard, as a service to all retailers?
Yeah. So I don't think that this is going to be, at least in the foreseeable future, this will not be a monopoly. It will most certainly be either a duopoly or oligopoly. I mean, the usual suspects are Google, Facebook, pretty much ubiquitous coverage on almost every mobile device in the world. Then you have Apple, which in most Western markets has about 50% share. And then there's Amazon. I mean, everyone's in a hubbub today about Amazon, and kind of similar to how Google was competing with everyone 5 to 10 years ago. Today, Amazon is seen that same way. But more specifically to your question, retail technology is probably in some segments or geographies 5 to 15 years behind where the tech space is today. What we're seeing today is the rapid evolution of point of sale systems, right? It's moving to the cloud. That was a revolutionary idea maybe 10 years ago, but today everything's in the cloud. So I think just based on the life cycle, the tech life cycle of retail specifically, I think you're going to have a lot of middleware providers, but on the actual marketing and advertising end, I do believe that you will have at minimum a duopoly, or at most a duopoly, but at least you'll have, a handful of players in there.
Yeah, so that makes more sense. It would be like a bunch of software companies that will plug into, via API to, the Google and Facebooks of this world to provide that 360 view, if you will.
One of the biggest surprises, I guess, every time I'm reminded of it, it's always a surprise for me, is that as large and in charge as Google and Facebook are, they don't have the resources to actually extend themselves to the end consumer, and they need those value-added resellers or partners to take it that extra mile. And I think mostly everybody realizes that at any time, either of them can disrupt your space in that supply chain, but they're leveraging their brand and their power to get those partners to do that last mile. And I would imagine eventually Google will step in and replace them, as they do in a lot of online search elements. Think travel, think now online booking. Even so, the way they're competing with large agencies, right, where they can just set up a team that goes direct to the brand or whoever that resale partner is.
Yeah. Well, that's actually maybe a good segue to, how you think about strategy for SweetIQ and how you come up with it, or like what are the principles that you use to come up with, to set your strategic plan?
I don't necessarily use, on a personal level, I don't necessarily use a structured framework, like the Gazelle or any of those. I'm a big fan of reverse engineering. It's where do I want to go? Or where do I want to be in X time? So, 2018 planning, and just working it backwards, and then dealing with all the different variables that we have, in our sphere of influence, as well as in our universe, right? We can only control what we can control. And as as we grow as people and as managers and business people, you realize what you really can't control is not that much. You have influence, but you can't really control. It's just, for the most part, an illusion. That being said, is it's very important for us and for me is you get buy-in from your team. It's, hey, this is where I think we should go. Get their buy-in. And then, my job really is today, as in my position, is to question and to make sure we've thought through every possible angle or hiccup that can occur along that path. And it's really getting the team to work cohesively and in concert to develop that overall strategy, and then most importantly, the tactical elements that need to occur for that strategy to not only be successful, but to even have a chance at success in the first place.
What do you see as the challenges that come up to achieve that success?
There's a lot. You have every new individual brought into that process is a challenge, because you need to communicate the vision to them. They need to buy into the vision, and then they have to be aligned in order to execute the vision. And that's, from my perspective, that's always the biggest challenge, because we're all human. We all have our own ideas. We all interpret things differently. And once you iron out all of those wrinkles, there's the day-to-day challenges of operating, right? There's challenges that come up on a daily or hourly basis, and you have to entrust in your team to be able to continue to solve those challenges or take advantage of those opportunities while still all running in the same direction.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night from these aforementioned challenges?
There's a lot of things that keep me up at night. It's always making sure teams are aligned. Obviously, that's more or less, like I was saying earlier, things that you kind of can control or influence. I guess what keeps me up more at night is what you have no influence over, you can't control. Is Google going to shut down this whole Google My Business program tomorrow? Is there going to be some new upstart somewhere that basically makes everything that we do irrelevant? Are the customers happy, or are they going to renew with us? Right? Are the employees happy, most importantly, right? What can we do to make this a better place to work, right? So, and everything in between. I mean, I don't think there's any entrepreneur that's not always thinking and always adapting to their environment and the lessons that they're learning and how they can apply those lessons to their environment.
What excites you the most today?
You know, early on in our career as SweetIQ, someone told me that there's two things that stick out of my mind. Like, I guess cliches. You don't know what you don't know, and you'll know that you've made it when you made it. And I'll deal with the former first. So I know that I made it when we made it, when the machine is just working. You know, whether or not I'm here or not, the business runs, right? And so what excites me the most about that is that over the last 18 months, the momentum and the acceleration of our scale is just continue to accelerate. And we've hit, I walk into this office, it's huge. Never in my wildest dreams when we started off SweetIQ over 7 years ago, did I imagine we would have so many people that are working with us towards our vision for local marketing. So the excitement is just the continued increase of the pace of acceleration and the pace at which we move as a company. And now post acquisition, we now have a giant company with, over 300,000 customers, a sales force of over 3,000 people across, the United States and Canada to help accelerate and bring to market our vision. And as we integrate with the company, with Gannett and Reach Local, the ability for us to go even beyond where we are today becomes more and more realizable with every passing day. In terms of the you don't know what you don't know, the exciting part of that is that every day as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, I learn new things that I didn't know before, right? And in looking back, you're able to see this is how you would do it differently, learn from the mistakes that you made so you don't make those same mistakes again, right? I think it was Einstein that said, only a fool will kind of repeat the same mistake over and over without changing anything. I'm botching that quote, but that's what's exciting is, I didn't know things yesterday that I know today, and how can I use that knowledge to just continue to accelerate towards our vision?
Yeah, you see definitely an interesting space in terms of your point of view of the local marketing industry. What do you see happening right now in the space that maybe no one is talking about?
I think it's a tough question, but marketing, if you ever look at those MarTech charts of all the different segments and software providers, and in it, it's huge, it's gigantic. I think the elephant in the room to a certain extent is what does max, what does optimal MarTech look like? How many software or pieces of software or services can a marketing department subscribe to without everyone diluting themselves out to almost having no value? And the other thing is that everybody's on, the automation and automation through AI. And there's no doubt that this is coming. It's at the forefront. It's on the bleeding edge today, but it is coming again. Whether we like it or not, it's going to be a part of our lives. I think on one extreme you have, we're just going to be running cyborgs to do everything for us. And, we're going to live in a utopia where we can, be fed grapes all day while lounging by the pool. But the reality is marketing has so many nuances to it that I don't ever see a day, at least in the near future, where it will entirely be managed by bots or by artificial intelligence, because you always need that human interaction. Just think about, dialects or slang or sensitivities, cultural sensitivities. Yes, we can learn from them, but culture evolves. Culture evolves today very rapidly, right? So you'll always need that hands-on approach with marketing. So it's where does the maximum level of subscription services occur, or where's the optimal level occur? And what is that delicate balance between humans and, bots and artificial intelligence lie? And there has to be consolidation around that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that you have, 50 companies doing the same thing, pushing different flavors of chocolate to customers. They all can't survive. And we're seeing that within our own industry. I mean, where a year ago I had, almost 10 competitors on every deal. Today we're down to 3. We acquired one last year, but the truth is there's really only a handful of people that can compete. We have one of our competitors just went public. Another competitor raised a large Series B, and we're owned by a Fortune 500 company. So other than that, everyone else, they may matter, but they don't matter. What we realize too at the enterprise level, enterprises like dealing with other enterprises, especially in a mature ring industry like local search. Yeah,
especially public companies that are safe. So it sounds like you're seeing 2 arguments. One, on the business side, there's going to be more M&A, more consolidation, because those Lumascape charts just need to go away. It just doesn't make sense. And then from the tech side, automation, AI, those technologies are obviously coming. Specific, maybe a last question, specific to technologies, which ones are you actively looking, investing on that are really pertinent to your business?
From day one, we've always invested in machine learning. I mean, we have a giant crawling engine at the core of our software. And as it's less core to our business today than it used to be, we had to build, machine learning in there to learn on how to crawl and what to crawl. And in that too, we also have, we have some natural language processing capabilities in how we decode reviews. So I think that on that side, but for us, it's actually, we don't necessarily need the bleeding edge for our business. It's how do you automate all the tasks that our customers expect in terms of interactions, A, and B, what other products can we plug into, right? And so a lot of the time, entrepreneurs who are raising early stages of capital, even A and B rounds, are, often asked by investors, are you a spoke or a hub, right? Meaning, are you a tool or a single point tool or a single point solution, or are you a platform? And as for us, as our industry evolves and as SweetIQ evolves as a platform now within a much larger orbit of larger different platforms, we see ourselves becoming a platform to all of those other tools and softwares. Part of our acquisition was because we have a well-developed, well-thought-out, easy-to-use, enterprise-grade platform. And so now we're going to leverage that to plug in other services and other modules or functionalities to help our sister companies continue to achieve our, now unified vision.
Michael, it's really interesting. I learned a ton. Maybe where can people learn more about SweetIQ, about yourself?
Yeah, SweetIQ.com, or any social channel at MySweetIQ, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's about it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.